Thank you so much.
No problem. I'm actually waiting.
Right.
I know.
We're better prepared for this year than we've ever been at the end of the year.
I know.
Oh, I know.
Because I've never been this.
Well, and I had
Yeah.
to do PD, it's huge.
It was just
We
because
all-
I'm here.
That's great.
That's it.
That's
We
what
don't
we're
get
renovating.
it. Has to be.
Oh, this is the best it's ever been.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you, Rachel. All right, so my project was how the one-to-one devices have changed things in the school to improve growth and engagement. So the biggest problem, which was my first thing, was to identify the problem, is that students aren't engaged, as we see every day, but I think it's maybe worse in math than anything else, because they come in, they don't like to sit down and do paperwork and do problems, and they have no ability to take their math skills and solve real-world problems with it. They can take it if you give them step by step and do a division problem, but if you give them a problem that requires division, they don't understand that. So the hope is that the one-to-one devices will improve their engagement enough so they pay attention more in class and it leads to higher levels of learning. So we implemented our one-to-one technology. So this project determines their engagement after they got the devices, and hopefully we see higher levels of growth too. The goals are to increase student engagement, increase student growth, and determine the impact of the Chromebooks in school. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the literature basically says that it's important for kids to understand higher level math concepts. One thing builds on the next. They can't really solve real world problems until they understand the underlying concepts. The instruction has to result in the ability to problem solve, to come up with a solution and share it, which again, we see every year when we do like the MDCs that they just don't have that ability. You know, they can kind of tell you what they're doing, but they can't really explain it. Students gradually develop disability over time, and 6th graders don't have much of it. Of course, the importance of engagement, the one research says lack of engagement causes students to tune out and turn off. In the moment, engagement does correlate with higher levels of achievement, which we all know if they're interested in what we're doing and they're doing it, they do a better job. Students have to feel self-determined, interested, and motivated if they're going to benefit. So the idea is, some people feel like technology is a good thing to put in the classroom because they say it's connecting what we're doing with the real world and kids are more interested in technology. But then on the other hand, there are other people that say the potential for distraction is too great, so it's not worth putting it in the classroom because you're always going to have 4 or 5 kids that are trying to get on games or Facebook, as we've seen all year. And a lot of research shows that kids say they're more interested with technology, but it really doesn't change their behavior in class. So I was kind of investigating that. There's these references. My 2 questions that I really looked at, one was, how does implementing technology affect their academic growth on math and on 21st century skills? The second question was, how does implementing technology change their engagement in class? So I looked at it 2 completely different ways. We're trying to determine both effects, and hopefully we'll identify further steps. That's kind of what we have to talk about today. After we see how this came out, what can I do next year to build on this project? To say, of course, I primarily tied it into math, so one thing I was thinking is, like, could I tie it into language arts and other things and see if it's across the board or if we're just seeing these things in one subject area. So what I did for part A, which was where I looked at math growth in 21st century, I took last year's kids versus this year's kids. Since last year's kids did not have, as far as I had the iPads one day pretty much all year last year. So last year they had no technology in this room. 97 kids, male versus female, it was pretty close. The main difference last year to this year was last year we had 17 with IEPs, this year we had 27 with IEPs. Last year, the math disabilities were pretty similar though, 5 versus 6. Behavior modifications, 5 last year, 8 this year. And accelerated, I had the exact same number, so that group was pretty tit for tat as far as comparing. Then this year, for the engagement part, I just looked at this year's students because I didn't have that data from last year. It would have been pretty hard to get it. So what I had the kids do was they looked at engagement on pen and pencil activities, engagement on cooperative learning, Kagan, engagement when we did competitive things, engagement when we used the Chromebooks, and they rated their engagement. So the first thing I kind of had to do here was to show what what things I use to measure them. Of course, we all know about MAP. It does, if you look at the MAP data for math, it breaks it down by strand. I don't know if language arts does that too. But I pretty much just used overall, and I had to show some examples of MAP type questions they look at. The 21st century skills is based on our rubric. For math this year, we had critical thinking and problem solving, productivity, communication, and collaboration. Last year we actually measured 6 skills, but I only pulled these 4 out since that was the only 4 that I could compare one year to the next. So our rubrics, everybody's familiar with those. And one nice thing is, you know, I rated them last year and I rated them this year. Terry and I kind of talk about it, and Rachel too, whenever we rate those classes. But I feel like the rating was fairly consistent with the 21st century skills. And then students will use a Likert scale, basically like totally disengaged to totally engaged, like a 1 through 5 type scale, to rate their levels of engagement with and without use of technology, and using specific technology applications. So I'll kind of explain how I put that together in just a minute. So here was the technology survey. I did it on a Google form so it'd be easy to collect. It all just went straight into a spreadsheet. And that way I could also sort it by student, because I also, for them, I collected who it was. So I could sort it by what period they were in and that type of thing. And these were the type of questions. One thing I was worried about is that these kids don't know how to define engagement. So I can't just say, are you engaged? Because they have no clue what that is. So we discussed it, and then I gave them this. You know, like 1 is completely disengaged. That means you're not participating at all. You're sitting there doing nothing. A 3 would be not really engaged or disengaged. You're doing your work, but you're not really interested in it. Whereas a 5 would be completely engaged, participating, interested, curious, motivated, and excited about what you're learning. So we kind of defined it as a class so they knew what they were doing before they filled the survey out. And then for the intervention group, student answered questions about these things: Socrative, Kahoot, Today's Meet. Not all the classes use this, so I can only take that data from one class. Quizzes, Google Slides, Nearpod, and other math video games we played. Let's see if I can find it. So like this, what's your general level of engagement with doing a flashback on Socrative? And then I also asked them another question was, what's your level of engagement when you come in and you had a flashback to do on paper and pencil, to see what the difference would be. The control and intervention groups both took MAP tests in August and January, so that should be a good comparison. And then the 21st century skills were scored in September and January for both groups. The perception of engagement survey I gave them at the end of the year, so they wouldn't have been exposed to all these different things. And they could, like I said, I instructed them on what it meant before we started the survey. So here's where it gets interesting, I think. This is what is pretty neat. Here's the group that did not have technology last year, which we all felt was a pretty strong group of students. Here's the group that got technology this year. So when you look at comparison, it wasn't as different as I thought it would be. I actually took, to make this judgment, who's above, who's on, and who's below, I took their middle of the year MAP score, where it should be, what range it should have been in. So we had below grade level, last year was 26%, this year was 33% on MAP. On was 36 last year, 34 this year, and above was 38 versus 33. So it wasn't as different. It felt different in class. It felt like we had a much lower group, but when you actually looked at the numbers, it wasn't. Sometimes I think that made me think it's my perception. I don't know. One thing I noticed though, it seemed like this on grade level was pretty close to the same number. And it was like all the high students flipped from last year being all these high students, that whole group went to being low students. So maybe that's why it felt so different one year to the next. But all in all, it was relatively similar for comparison. So here's MAP. MAP last year, the MAP students grew in math from fall to winter 7.73. This year with technology, they grew 8.47, which was surprising. Because it did, again, it seemed like it was about the same growth. That equates though, when you figure it out, that's 8.9 weeks of math growth. That difference, that's a lot, that's a huge difference. Which I also said on here that they also came in with an RIT 1.7 points lower at the beginning of the year, which means there was more room to grow. So, not necessarily that that's all of it, but it may, I don't want to just say it's for sure technology that made them grow this much more. But it's possible that was part of it. And it's possible it also could have been partially because they weren't very high when they came in. The second thing I analyzed was meeting what percent met the growth goal, instead of just looking at overall numbers and averages. So last year, without technology, 80% met the growth goal and 20% did not. This year with technology, it was almost the same. 81% met and 19% did not. So it was not very different when you looked at actual students who met goal versus students who didn't. They were supposed to grow 3 points. So 81% grew that 3 points this year, at least. So one thing that this made me think was partially the beginning part of the year. I only measured fall and winter because we didn't have spring. The beginning part of the year, some of it may have been due to the learning curve with the technology. I mean, there was a lot, especially for I think the low socioeconomic kids, they're not used to using that kind of technology every day. And so part of the learning curve takes time that they might not be spending learning math because they're learning the Chromebook. So then I pulled it by ability level. This is the third way I looked at it, which I think really makes what I just said come out to be more true. This was the difference in growth last year and this year for kids below grade level. Very little difference, 7.5 to 7.9. Kids who were on grade level, 7.8 last year to 8.6 this year. Above was the biggest difference, which to me, if technology really was what impacted this, it's the kids who are higher already when they come in the door.
Coach Eversky, dial 3140.
That it benefited the most, which would make sense. Because they know how to use technology, So that, it's neat to pull this, to me it was interesting. It was a lot of work to do this, but to look at it different ways, a lot of it just clicked and made sense. So again, these guys don't have that learning curve with technology. These folks did, and the ones that didn't grew more. All right, so now 21st century skills, which are, we really try to use the rubric, but of course it is more interpretive than what the map is. But across the board, every single growth area, you look at the difference, last year's in blue, this year's in red. Critical thinking, last year their growth was 0.47, this year it's 0.64. So, and I didn't even know I was going to do this project when we scored. So there was no way I had in my mind, okay, we're going to score these kids higher to make it come out this way. I didn't decide why I was doing this project about a month ago. So it seems that the Chromebooks definitely, and to me, it does help kids collaborate better. I mean, when they're collaborating on a Google Slides or a Google Doc.
You do it at the communication at home?
Yes. So the growth would be more. I think that you would definitely see more ability. And this is where I think you would expect to see the most growth with Chromebooks is in 21st century skills. Because now they have the tools to use 21st century skills. All right, so now we get to the engagement part. Now, cooperative learning, I use that term loosely because it's not just K and then I put in there for those questions. I average any activity that kids do together in my class. Like we play basketball. I added that engagement in with this. We, some of the other games, I put like the grudge match we did. So overall engagement with cooperative learning was a 4 out of 5. Fairly high, fairly high. Technology, a little better. Overall, when you average all the technology together, pencil and paperwork, as you would expect, they just don't, it's pretty low. Basically a 3 is saying I'm doing the work, but I'm not interested in it, which is what most of them do when they're sitting there with pencil and paper. Interestingly though, when I pulled this apart a little bit and looked at actual student numbers, kids who rated something a 4 or 5, I said, 4 to 5 were pretty much totally engaged. Only 18 of 97 kids said they were totally engaged when doing problems on paper. 28 said they were totally engaged with technology, but 30 when they were doing cooperative learning. So again, it goes back to technology's good, but it doesn't take the place of working with other kids because they like that. And I think when we can do both together, collaborate on a presentation, then
Miss Lawrence, please dial 3140. Miss Lawrence.
we're probably giving them the best thing, the best thing we can give them. Then I pulled that also by grade level, below, on, above. Below grade level, we see that a huge gap, but cooperative learning and technology were very, very close, almost the same. On grade levels where we saw technology, kids love it. The kids on grade level, so your middle of the board students like technology far better than anything else. I'm sorry, cooperative learning. And then it was the high students that really like the technology the best.
Well, that makes sense because it's easier for them.
It does, because it's natural. So I also think that a lot of times these students in these brackets, they rely on their partners to help them understand, and the technology is not, they might like it, but it's not a helper to them, like a partner who knows what they're doing. Then I took it by gender to see what it looked like that way, and this pretty much made sense to me because generally males like math class better than females do. And males across the board were more engaged with paper and pencil. Both, though, very high with technology. Males, though, really like the cooperative learning better than the females. So they like that interaction. I think it's because the females in 6th grade have drama with one another all the time, and some days they like it, and some days they hate it. So that's my take on that. And also, a lot of times when we're doing cooperative learning, we're out of our seat. And I think that's why boys like that, because they like getting up and moving around the room. Oddly enough, though, I'll show you in a minute. I think I have it on another slide. Okay, so here was by activity, things that we did in class. What was the most? The Survivor game won out for the whole year. That was the best. Thank goodness we saved it for last. They like the grudge watch. They love the math ball. Again, the boys, I think, like that because they're able to throw a ball when they get a question right. Quiz train, which I think is a pretty cool, they did not like. That was a 3. That was the lowest of anything cooperative learning.
They've done
I think they're tired of it, I guess. I don't know. When I got introduced to Kagan, I was like, oh, I'm going to love this, but they're just tired of it. Pencil and paper would actually beat out quiz train, which was surprising. And paper and pencil flashback, pretty low. Their general overall level engagement with any of these things was a 3.9, which isn't bad. Then when you look at the technology, Google Slides and Today's Meet were just okay, but they really liked is Kahoot, which brings competitive working together, but again, this is, I think, putting cooperative learning and technology together. That's why they like it. Quiz is, that's more independent, but they still liked it really well because it's competitive. Nearpod scored pretty well. Socrative, the flashback, they like it because, have any of you used that yet? Because it shows them up here, it's kind of like overall the class, what % got it right. And I think they like that, like trying to do better because it's sort of a competitive type thing. So overall, technology was the best, the most engaging to kids. But when you looked at individual activities, some of the cooperative learning outscored it, like the Survivor game and the math football game. And so I felt like it indicates they crave peer interaction and competitive problem solving. So my next steps, that's what you guys have to help me come up with, are what would I do next to validate what I did, or what else could I research to get more data?
What would you research?
Yeah, what would be the next steps for us to say, like, is technology really responsible for this? Any thoughts?
Does the technology, the specific device make a difference, like iPads versus Chrome
I think
tablets?
that-
Because I think they play more on iPads and stay more focused on the Chrome tablets, definitely.
So comparing it, like bringing the iPads in and doing comparisons
Different
that way. That would be interesting.
What works better to you? Like, what do they know more to use? The Chromebook
Or the iPad.
not necessarily what, I mean, it's both what do they enjoy, but also what are they able to use? Like the low kids obviously don't have as much experience, so would they have more experience with a Chromebook or more experience with some other
iPad or their phone. Some schools do like the bring your own device thing, where they have phones, bring their phones and they let
So
them
that
use them.
you can get rid of
I
that.
think that's a horrible idea myself, but. Also, I think it would be really neat to get like to have your data from your map data and see if it was followed the same trend as the map did.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, if you would share it with me, I would love to just,
Sure.
like last year and this year, I would love to see if it would work for language arts and math the same way. You know, it's hard to say.
Are there as many, like, programs or apps, you know, like, there's a ton of stuff out there for math and technology, or for math and technology. But for language arts,
It's tougher
It's
to come up
harder.
with stuff.
you know, you gotta come
I
up with
think.
almost kind of equivalent applications or programs to use that would really benefit their engagement. And for language arts, that's kind of hard to.
Most of the things you had up there, we could easily use. I mean, we already
The
doing
assessment
a lot
ones, yeah.
a lot of the same kind of things.
I think the hardest thing with, like I notice a lot of yours, like when you give multiple choice responses, they're long responses, and a lot of these programs are not set up to where you could put a long, like a Hoot.
Yeah.
You
That's
can't
what
put
we
a long
struggle with,
response.
and I struggle with
Yeah.
that.
The only way you can do it is if you take yours and you clip it as an image and put it in there, which that's what Casey and I do sometimes when we have long responses. You can just clip images out of your document and put in it as your question rather than putting the responses in A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
But it makes it harder to use for subjects that, you know, for math, a lot of times it's just a right or wrong answer. You know, numbers are pretty easy to put in.
I'd be really curious to know, because, you know, anytime you try something new, it's new to the kids, they're much more engaged. I'd be curious to see how they do by their 8th grade year. You know, are we seeing the same growth, or anytime you do something new, kids are engaged.
Right.
I mean, we built it up so much, you're the first to get it and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. By the time they're in the 8th grade, will this be like pen and paper to them?
It could be.
I just,
I don't know, it'd be neat to track it every, like,
yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, because they're not sixth grade anymore, then, like, they don't have a Chromebook individually at the elementary school, but they've had that year experience now, so in 7th grade next year, they're probably gonna be a lot more fluent with it.
no, I think it would be, and actually, these two groups, we could track all the way through. I mean, it'd be very easy for me to get the math, I know, because this, you know, the 7th grade teachers have all that right now. You can get it from 8th grade the following year, and then follow this group all the way
Yeah.
through and see what the difference
And then you
is.
could really monitor if it's the technology or not too, you can track them.
Because the more information, the more accurate it is. I mean, it's hard to take 1 year and pull it out and say, yes, technology did it. Because technology certainly made a difference, but I don't know that technology totally did make these kids grow that much more this year.
Well, we're gonna be better at monitoring them and making sure they're staying on task. I think that was a struggle at first. Kids were better able
Right.
to play when they weren't supposed to be working.
Well, one of my wish lists for the new school is to have 2 projectors.
Oh, me too.
And to have Haparda up on one, or if I'm doing the Today's Meet for the higher level questions, and then your other one has your main lesson on it. And I think that would be, because then kids could see that, everybody could see what they're on, you know, the whole class can see it.
I'd be interested if you did different stations, you know, like in your CCM classes, you have three total people.
Yeah.
And if you had different type of activities, maybe you have Kahoot in one section and, you know.
That would be
something like that. It may make a difference in that, you know, their attention span is only, 8 minutes or whatever, and if you switched it, if that would make a difference in their
It very well
engagement.
might. Our biggest struggle with that is like, these kids don't do well switching.
Transitions are
Transitions.
awful.
Getting
It
up and
takes
moving.
so long. That, I mean, we tried it and it seemed like we wasted like 8 minutes of our class moving stations, which, that's huge.
But if you do it all on the same device, then they would just pick it up.
Pick the device,
Walk.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that would be something neat to try next year too. I don't know, a lot of different things I could try. I did find it, you know, it was time consuming, but I found it beneficial to me to see, and I would really like to follow this and finish up the project. You know, maybe try to publish it.
The growth between fall and winter, just alone, that was significant.
It was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, over 8 weeks worth of growth, almost 9. That's a lot.
I think they're getting more technology in the elementary schools, so that learning curve of learning how to use all that stuff is going to be less. I think. When they come in, they're going to be ready to go.
Next year it should be better than this
Yeah.
year, I would think.
I would think
And
so.
I think, and you still have mixed feelings, because some of the highest schools don't have that much technology
true.
in the grade school. They save it for the middle school and make sure they've got everything down before we get them. So, that's
I don't
another
know.
thing.
I still
I'm
like
curious
them.
about. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, I wish they came in here and it was new, because I think it's
Yeah.
neat, it's something big for them, but it won't be next year. So, anyway, the last part of this, this was just kind of a summary of what we talked about. You know, kids above or on grade level seem to benefit more from technology than kids below, even though they all say they're engaged with it. Their 21st century skills are good. Females seem to benefit the most from the technology. As far as baseline engagement to technology, there was the most for females. And then the last part of this was the survey that I sent out, and I did not collect who did it because I said it would be anonymous, so I didn't take usernames. So I had 9 people respond, and that was between all of our 6th grade group and the math group, because it was just people that I would meet with. Variety of experience levels in those 2 groups. So, but it was just about the trust in the building, which I felt was good, and it is. But everybody feels like the trust in this building is great. So I just emailed a digital link, and then pretty much I don't know if any of you took it or not, but disagree, neutral, agree, what things were very important, what things were not. Pretty much across the board, everybody thinks we're doing all these things. Everybody has trust that their colleagues have high qualifications. They all believe, and I'll pull up the graphs here in a minute. Almost every one of these is 100% agree. You know, everybody agrees that we communicate well, that we talk about things, that we share resources, that we're welcome to go in our colleagues' rooms. We don't feel uncomfortable with that. The only thing that I noticed, some people feel like that's not important in a school, or if it's just sort of important. But I don't know, you know, but pretty much most everybody, like I said, across the board is pretty much anytime, it's 89 and 11 across the board. So it just must be a couple of people, 1 or 2 that feel like, pretty much one person I think feels like that's not very important. But everybody thinks we do it. Everybody thinks we're all welcome in our colleagues' classrooms to observe. 89% think that's very important. Questions related to honesty of colleagues, everybody thought that was important. Everybody thinks we are honest. It made me feel good about this building when I looked at the results of this. It felt good about working here. Everybody thinks all our colleagues have good intentions for students and good intentions when we work together. We're all confident in one another. We all think it's important. Everybody thinks we share student results honestly. Most people feel like it's very important to do that. The only area of weakness in the whole survey that I sent out was sometimes some people feel like not everybody's pulling the same direction. And that was the only thing, and even so, that's so minimal. 6%, you know. Felt like maybe we're not all pulling the same direction sometimes. Everybody felt we could be learned from, everybody felt we contribute, everybody felt we were qualified. Everybody feels like we celebrate success together and that that's important for us to celebrate success together. Everybody thinks that we enjoy spending time together. I mean, just across the board, everybody feels like it's trust. So I put our strengths where we communicate, we observe each other, we believe in each other's character, each other's intentions, success, our camaraderie. The only thing that was a little, and so minimal, is not really a weakness, but just that we could work on a little bit more is to trust in sharing results and trust in having a shared vision, that we all share the same vision for students. And so as far as what we could do is we could all share student work and analyze what improvements need to make. We could develop a shared vision for our group. I think this year we went to more of a PLC, like at our team meetings, where we shared things. But I hope we do that more because I benefited. You know, every time somebody shared something, I went back and looked it up on my computer and I was like, oh, how could I use that? So, all in all, that's pretty much all I've got.
The atmosphere was, you all don't know this, but the atmosphere was so different at our team meetings because you felt like you were working with each other and not being watched. And it was very different this year, and it was great. It's like it used to be.
I liked it. I felt like this year was huge as far as just every time that we sat in that room and all met together, that everybody was working together. And at first when they said, well, bring your data, I was nervous. I was like, oh, wow, you know, we're going to do all this work. I was a little overwhelmed, but it wasn't about what are you doing. It was, what are you doing that's good that can help everybody else?
Share.
You know, so I really liked it. And I enjoyed the project, and thank you for letting me share it with you.
And I just had another thought though. I'd be curious when we said that before about these kids coming in having had the Chrome tablets. I wonder if the data's going to be the same with them.
I probably will collect this for a
I
few
know
years
you will.
because I'm a data lover. cover.
Yeah, to use below.
I'm
Yeah, and
hoping-
see if it does the same, if it has the same impact when they've already had it. It seemed like
It's
they've
not
had
new.
about 8.
Right, it's not new anymore to these kids, so it may not. We may not see it at all next year. So, but you know I'm nerdy that way. I'll keep up with it. And I think it'll be interesting, like, something like this would be valuable even for our district over time, you know, if you had good data over time to say, was this a good investment or not?
But it justifies it too.
Right.
It does. I mean, I'd love to show this to,
Upgrade or whatever.
at least show the data part to the board. And
Yeah.
say, you know, thanks for the Chromebooks, look what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Do you
So.
think that the technology enhanced parent enrollment this year, by any chance?
I would think, because I know I had several parents that were like, you know, they relied on the website, that several parents said thanks for the videos,
Yeah.
or thanks for sending the kids assignments. I think
Some
it's
of them
that.
that probably wouldn't have communicated before, it was probably easier for them to communicate.
I think so. I do. So,